says a lot about us as individuals and as a society. Words have power. They can hurt, they can help, they can influence, or they can inflame. They can convert, they can color, or they can confuse. When I was a real newbie in this field, way back at the turn of the last century, I was pretty confident that I knew where I stood and that I was on the right side of the animal research issue. But after hearing a very powerful presentation from Andrew Rowan, who was formerly of this center and is now the Chief Scientific Officer of HSUS, I wasn't so sure anymore. Speaking as a scientist, Andrew spent a lot of his time discrediting the work of fellow animal researchers. I thought he was showing a lot of disdain for his colleagues, and he offered some very fascinating data that showed the shrinking public support for the use of animals in research. Looking back, I see that he was also planting the seeds for a new discipline called humane science, where animals are replaced by alternatives. Calling such science humane suggests that it is cruelty-free and consequently deserves a higher morality rating. During the Q&A, a white lady in the front row raised her hand. And she fit the profile that was circulating around the research community at the time for your typical animal rights activist. She wore her long gray hair wildly cascading down her back, and she probably was wearing sneakers. Timidly, she asked a very thoughtful question. Is somebody not hearing me? Am I doing all right? Timidly, she asked a very thoughtful question. If we respect all life, she said, why aren't we working with the right to life groups? Well, before I could process the political ramifications of such an unlikely alliance, a man in the last row jumped up, and he was raising his hands and he was waving wildly, and he said, I'm with the Sierra Club. Human beings are destroying our world. Who would want more of them around? Well, suddenly, I no longer knew where I wanted to sit, and I wasn't really comfortable, and I didn't know where I fit. Early on, I realized that many people in my new world didn't find any middle ground. Either you were for the animals or you were against them. Whenever anybody asked me what I did, I would find myself dancing as fast as I could. I tried to explain the difference between rights and welfare. I tried to connect the dots between good animal care and good science. I rarely got to use any of the standard talking points that I had been given. Virtually every major medical advance, nearly every Nobel laureate. Before I could even suggest that all scientists love animals and don't beat their wives, I'd get interrupted by the inevitable question, but which side are you on? It was hard to explain that I wasn't on a side, but somewhere in the middle. And that the question was not, are you for or against animals, but rather, where on the continuum of animal use do you stand? On one end, I submit, are people who hold the philosophical position that there is no use of animals by humans that is justified. They hold that any or all use of animals for human benefit is morally repugnant, that people who use animals are immoral, that they are wrong, that they are bad people. For these extremists, there is no wiggle room. There are no arguments to be made, and there is no common ground to be found. On the other far side would be someone who believes that animals are ours to use in any way for any reason. And while they do exist, and I am sure they do, I have yet to meet anyone engaged in research who maintains such an absolute position. In the vast middle are the people who care about animals. They don't want animals to suffer abuse by humans, and they support legal sanctions against cruelty. Their main concern is pain and suffering. They want a kinder and a gentler world. As far as research goes, they care about what we do with animals and how we do it. I also like to think that most of these folks appreciate, especially as they get older, that not everything is black and white, that there are grays, and that little is simple and one-dimensional. If you do a quick survey, I suspect that you'll find that most people who even think about it find that the line between animal rights and animal welfare has blurred. Few people not directly involved in an animal enterprise find it even relevant to distinguish between the two concepts. However, once a concept like animal rights is accepted into common parlance, it paves the way for legislation that can have profound impact on the way we live our lives, including what we can and can't do. In this instance, language leads the law, so understanding the words rights and welfare as applied to animals really matters. Make no mistake, the ultimate battle will be fought in the courtrooms of this country, which is why we need to get the attention of attorneys and government affairs people and policy staff who work in industry or academia where animals are used. They need to be brought up to speed on the difference between rights and welfare, or there will be no one qualified to defend the use of animals in research in the courts where it really counts. Just last week, I happened to find a perfect example to drive home all of the points I'm trying to make. Last Monday, Diane Reamshaw on NPR focused on the fight for legal rights for animals. Their interest was triggered by this article, Should a Chimp Be Able to Sue Its Owner by Charles Siebert, that appeared in the New York Times Magazine section on April 23rd. Diane promotes a show that she considers smart conversation and civil dialogue, and the discussion was framed as follows. In the U.S., there are many laws on the books to protect animals from abuse, but a group of lawyers is trying to take animal rights a huge step further. And here I think if you're reading carefully, you'll see that animal rights is already assumed to be a discrete entity rather than something that the cases are trying to advance. Led by longtime animal advocate Stephen Wise, the Non-Human Rights Project filed a lawsuit recently on behalf of a chimpanzee named Tommy. Citing evidence of the cognitive sophistication of chimps and other species, the group ultimately seeks personhood status for animals. A number of leading primatologists are among those who support the effort, but there is also enormous opposition on legal, moral, and practical grounds. So the guests included Stephen Wise, who's an attorney and the president of the Non-Human Rights Project, Charles Siebert, who is a convert and a very great supporter of the animal rights position. He wrote the article that was described before, an attorney from the Catholic University of America, and research's own Alan Dittrich, the president of the Massachusetts Society for Medical Research. Alan was invited to call in to share his views on the impact of research on granting personhood to chimps. What followed his mild-mannered, reasonable answer to that question was a telling example of how contentious and emotional this issue really is. The first caller immediately began attacking animal research. It was a little off topic, but there was some sense that this was a great opportunity to raise the issues involved in the use of animals in research. But then Stephen Wise attacked Alan. Thanks to technology, you can hear his words for yourself, I hope. No, wait a minute. Okay, I was getting so arrogant, thinking that I could control this. You need to make it louder, right? Can you hear it? No. Well, I wasn't sure that I had heard all of that in Alan's answer, but that was the response that his mere presence on the show evoked. So once I recovered and the vitriol quite took my breath away, I began fumbling with my computer, and after many false starts, I finally registered and posted the following comment, using, you might notice, my real name. Mr. Wise confounds this serious and sophisticated discussion with emotional blackmail, peppered with a careful choice of inflammatory language. It weakens his case. I thought it had a certain rhythm to it. I didn't think it was particularly offensive, and I liked it. I was proud that I actually got it posted. But much to my surprise, the Champion Commentator, who hides behind the screen name The Truth Seeker, took notice and quickly shot back. You are probably neither a scientist nor a lawyer, so what do you actually know about any of this topic? I must confess that as recently as 6:30 this morning, I was still trying to think of the right comeback to his arrogant attempt to keep me in my place. But I offer to you my qualification to explore this topic. It's found in a section that fell off my CV a long time ago. I am an old English teacher. Now let me clarify. I never really taught Old English or even Middle English. So to rephrase and to be clear and to communicate with you, I am a former English teacher. But that's not quite accurate either, since I suspect that once a teacher, always a teacher. So you can describe me as an old person who used to teach high school English, which is now known as language arts, who still loves language. And that's relevant because, you may ask, well, because language is the most fundamental and powerful instrument that we have. In his award-winning speech to the Philosophy Club entitled, Why You Should Want Me on the Life Raft, Cornell English professor George Hutchinson asserts that through language, we ask the most fundamental questions about how to live together and what we want in life. A good man, I would think, to have on board when you're having to build a brave new world from scratch, don't you think? So from my vantage point as an advocate for families affected by genetic diseases, as well as the biomedical research community, I've been observing uses and abuses of the written and spoken word for over 40 years. And I must confess that I am close to despair from the loss of civil discourse. For me, it is one of the great tragedies of our time. And you have to excuse the hyperbole, but I am a lover of language, so I'm entitled to take that leap. One of the villains in this contemporary drama course is technology. Now, I'm not a Luddite. I do not pine for the good old days. In fact, I have a lot of trouble remembering them. But I do wish that there were some way to turn down the noise, to lower the volume. Thanks to social media and the 24-hour news cycle, anyone with access to a computer has access to a megaphone and can broadcast his views. And there are no filters. Now, I know that there are always at least two sides to any story, and there's good and bad in everything. I am sure that there are those among you who will say that technology is neutral, neither good nor bad. Rather, it is the way the technology is used that makes the difference. Certainly the case can be made for all the positive contributions of technology. And maybe in some other talk on some other day, I'll get to explore all the ways that computers have improved communication and helped to bring people together for good, but not today. I think that cyberspace is the new Wild West, where anything goes and volume equates to value. Here, the number of hits, likes, retweets, and shares is a critical measure of success. And there is a definite correlation between the entertainment or shock value of a post to its popularity and ability to go viral. And since a picture is worth 1,000 words, it is particularly galling and distressing when an image is circulated and recirculated that misrepresents what the viewers are seeing. Here's a case in point. Here's a picture of so-called animal testing that surfaced on Twitter and was retweeted over 5,000 times over a course of 1 week. Unfortunately, for the well-meaning and caring people who retweeted it, this is not an example of animal testing at all. The picture originally appeared in a newspaper article in the Gainesville, Florida Sun back in 2011. The story details how local animal services, along with national animal rescue groups, seized 697 cats from a cat sanctuary in what HSUS described as the largest case of cat hoarding in the nation. Several of the cats were sick with feline leukemia, and they had to be put down. More than 300 needed to be spayed and neutered so they could be adopted out to loving homes. An anesthetic was administered to the cats that were being operated on as quickly as possible. And that emergency situation is what is shown here in this picture. As the photo traveled across the internet, it was stripped of its original context by unknown persons who purposely manipulated the image to garner support for their campaign to stop animal testing. Now I ask you, and I'm looking at you eye to eye. I've picked up my head from my notes, and I'm looking at the people I can see in the room. I ask you, does the end justify the means? Will this use or abuse of social media generate anything more than misplaced outrage? Will it motivate animal activists to action? Will it help affect social change? Most important, will it do anything at all to help animals? It's an old fundraising technique. You leave a lot of space and somebody's going to fill the vacuum. Well, some of us are going to meet in class after this, so you'll have an opportunity to respond to those questions. But as Tom Holder, founder of Speaking of Research, said, the irony is that many unsuspecting animal lovers were duped into feeling angry about an animal rescue, leading them to call for an end to the research that gave us the veterinary medicine the animals so desperately needed. So as I said before, the animal issue is complicated. It can be messy, and it can be highly emotional. There's no simple answer to the question of how the research community can counter the success animal advocates who, according to a recent article in National Geographic, actually rule the internet. So can we repair the damage to our cause that activists claim to have inflicted? Can we regain the trust and support of the public that they claim is quickly eroding? I think we can, but only if we stop defending the use of animals using the same old arguments Stephen Wise dismissed 30 years ago. In fact, and this is going to be controversial, I am sure, but I suggest we stop defending animal research altogether and engage the public in a whole new way. If we change the topic of conversation and focus on the myriad ways that we care about animals in research, I think people will begin to listen. Happily, a new hero has taken center stage, leading the charge to change the way we talk about animal research is an amazing one-woman dynamo named Cindy Buckmaster. She's been spreading the word at meetings and conferences all over the country. And the response to her call for action has been phenomenal. Her message is going viral in its own way and is motivating people who work in research to find their own authentic voice and speak out quietly but truthfully about who they are, what they care about, and what they do. Cindy urges her audience to stop hiding and change the world. She preaches personal and professional pride and believes that by going public, we can dismantle the activist attack on love and progress. She believes that engaging openly and honestly with the public, we can convert war to peace. She believes that by showing how much we care and what we care about, we can unite enemies and breed compassion for all living things. I just love Cindy's vision for a new world order. And I plan to make sure she gets a front row seat on that life raft right next to the English professor from Cornell. So in conclusion, I want to express my heartfelt thanks for not texting, not tweeting, and not talking during this presentation. It's not that I don't want to hear what you have to say, but technology, for those of you who are out there in cyberspace, really makes it difficult for us to communicate. And I'm welcoming the opportunity to have a discussion, a civil discussion, a caring discussion about all of these important issues at any time, and especially in the next 2 hours when we have our seminar. So I appreciate your attention, and I am really grateful for your time. And finally, I hope you take away some food for thought to go along with the pizza lunch. Thank you very much. I like to keep it short and sweet. So now it's your turn. Well, I won't take it personally. Yes. Well, my first advice, my first response is that I don't think debates ever achieve anything. Formal debates in particular. Nothing can hurt your heart as much as attending a debate among third graders who have resolved, should animal research be banned? To tell you, the level of discussion never rises to a point where it gets beyond emotion. And it really did make me cry because there was a lot of passion and there was a lot of propaganda that these young people were bringing to the forum. And this is a piece of question. What would I advise if I were in a debate and my opponent hijacked the topic? And is that a fair way to play it? But of course, all is fair in love and war. And when you have the floor, the microphone, you do have the advantage of saying whatever you want. I don't find that debates, as I said, are productive in any way at all, because it divides people rather than having them seriously look at a way to find a way forward together. The emotion on this issue and the feeling that the other side is not to be trusted gets in the way, I think, of our having an open and meaningful discussion. So I would say don't debate. Yes. Well, I would not, yes. I want to show what a good listener I was and how well I can translate your question. So if I get it wrong or turn the words around, you stand up and set the record straight. If you have someone who does not know a lot about this topic, how would I suggest that she or he go about getting more information if going to the advocates on either side is ruled out? So I don't think that you can learn a lot from the debate, but I do think that if you bring your critical thinking skills to any reading and any lectures or any programs that you attend, then you can get a lot of good information. But it's up to you to be able to take that information and kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. Decide what is hyperbole, what is propaganda, what is biased information. And it's important to remember, too, that the truth comes in many forms. And like knowledge, it's changing all the time. And what's true today may not be true tomorrow. And with a complex issue like this, it's very difficult to isolate one piece and be able to understand the big picture. And most of us are only kind of single focused. And another important thing is that we like to hear what we already believe. So if you go into a situation where you want information, it's good to get in touch with yourself and see where you really stand, because we filter all the information that we get from different sources. And we discount what we don't want to hear, and we applaud what kind of reinforces what we believe. So I think that a lot of the work has to be on the part of the person who's seeking truth. Unlike, by the way, the truth seeker that attacked me online, I found that amazingly arrogant, because he was typing and answering and going off topic and ranting and engaging people in this online dialogue. He didn't pay 1 second's worth of time on what was being talked about on the show. So I found that kind of typical of what happens on online discussions. They didn't lead anywhere either. And there was a lot of expressions of anger and distaste for our good friend Alan, who was, we really felt, a kind of sacrificial lamb. It wasn't supposed to be a debate about the use of animals in research. It was supposed to be an informative segment on a very, very important legal initiative to find a way to ascribe a single human value to a non-human animal in order to start changing the law. So it has a lot of legal questions, but it wasn't about the big questions. So does that answer your question? Good. That is a good question. It gave me lots of time to rant and rave about this seeker of truth who really thinks that he knows it all already. Are there any other comments? You guys out there in cyberspace? And Lena, Ellen, I saw you all on there. Yes.
I'm asking first, I have no grandchildren. I don't have to look at it. I think that the original question, I was asked was, what was the effective legal persecution on biomedical research? It's a very easy question to answer. If they have legal person with the legal, they would not be research. If we capture in research, so even some of the behavioral research what happened is Steve Watt, who is a messianic character who has tested 35 years of class in his quest, can't separate the simple legal questions about the answer from the hatred of all medical research. And so, like the politician who always wants to get his position on every topic, regardless of the debate question, he had to respond in that way. Then my simple answer was, any species given personhood would be removed for animal research. Simple as that. I mean, the whole answer is long. His character, his professional investment, writing, teaching, have all been focused to this point in time. And he's unable to be dispassionate. So, one of the answers in the face of that is remain calm. And try not to respond to time, but to drag the question back to what was. It's a little bit of an asymmetric program, given the host moderator. I agree with Jayne. I don't think the rates are useful, but I also thought when my colleagues sat there to book on the show, that not to have anybody speak from the research would be important.
Absolutely. The research community is under siege. They believe, and there is evidence to support, that some small segment of the activist community will go to any lengths to stop research, which includes defaming researchers, inflicting harm both due to reputation, having pictures on the internet claiming that they're outlaws, having protests, being told that we know where your children go to school, trying to constrain and stop people who are engaged in illegal and business by any means possible. Those are tactics which are employed, and people are loath to go public. That seems to be changing, but there is some reluctance on people to even mention or let anyone know what they do. Can't turn back the clock. Even though things are changing dramatically, and there are many, many advances in the way research is done, the way animals are utilized, but in fact, animals are still being used. And you expand that to exploitation of another species, and you get into a philosophical discussion about whether we have the right as humans to use another species for our own benefit. Now, most scientists are not real comfortable getting involved in a philosophical debate. There's also an uneven playing field here, which is something that is very difficult to overcome. And that is that on one side, there are people who would stop the use of animals in research. On the other side of this narrow piece of the battle are people whose job it is not to push back and fight the people who would like to stop what they're doing. Their real job, their day job, is to find cures and treatments or understand the mechanisms by which humans and animals are made sick and how we can make them well. So it's not the same ball game, and they don't have the same skills or the same end in mind. One are fighting to continue their work, and the other's whole goal is to bring about social justice and a change in the way society interacts with animals. It's a potentially contentious interaction. So where do you find the truth? How do you know what's real? I would venture to say that the reason that you even have to ask questions like that is all the fault of the internet. That we now have real trouble being able to determine the source of information, the credibility of the source, and the fact that it's so easy to copy, change, manipulate something that may have started out as legitimate and authentic and real can end up to be something entirely different. So it's a challenge. One more question. Privately? No, between you. Yeah. Oh. Well, several years ago, the Humane Society of the U.S. undertook a program called 2020. And the goal was to eliminate all painful use of animals in research by the year 2020. And it was an extraordinarily sophisticated and meaningful initiative, and several people recognized the import of this initiative. It was well funded, it was forward thinking, and the goal seemed noble, and I have to think that the motivation was pure. However, there are always language considerations. Who determines what's painful? If you eliminate pain from the research protocol. Isn't that, in effect, going to eliminate all use of animals in research? The question was from someone who gave a great deal of thought and analysis to the 2020 project and predicted that, indeed, by 2020, we would see a real change, if not the elimination of the use of animals in research, which I think was the ultimate goal. And the question was she right? Well, it's what, 2014 now. Things are changing. They're changing faster than ever. There are a tremendous number of changes in the way research is being conducted. There's a huge commitment to eliminating pain and distress wherever possible in research animals, redesigning protocols to refine experimental design specifically to eliminate or decrease animals' pain and suffering. There are efforts to find the best predictive models. Everybody agrees that the use of animals is one in a whole toolbox of weapons against disease and pain and suffering from disease and chronic conditions in humans and animals. Not the only one, and it's by no means perfect. But the idea of eliminating it before we have anything that can completely replace it is a very dicey proposition. It's a little scary. And that's part of the reason why people have concerns about banning the use of chimpanzees. It's not that they don't recognize the tremendous cognitive abilities and the social structures and our similarities to these amazing animals, but rather, if we are banned from using chimpanzees or other primates when it is necessary, and people believe that there are times that it is necessary, and they believe that there's a right way to do it, making it morally acceptable and fulfilling an ethical commitment to our own species as well as other species in this world that we share, then if we need it, we may not have it. It's a big risk, a big question. So is there an easier way? I would say that people on the far end who believe that we do not have any right to use animals for any reason for human benefit would say, no, we live, we die. We have no right to exploit another species just to change that natural course of events. So was she right? I don't know. I can't see into the future. I'm not afraid of the elimination of animals in research. I wouldn't go to the mattress to defend the need across the board. I think there's a middle ground. And if we as reasonable, caring people can come together to find the best way forward so that we all benefit, then come 2020, it might be that kinder, gentler, better world where we'll all benefit from our work together to make it a better, kinder, gentler world. Okay, I think that's it. That's all I got.